Hello, I'm Paul Briley, and you're listening to Off the Comma. I'm a human who cares about supporting other humans. On this podcast, we'll explore all facets of what it means to feel stuck in life. We talk with people just like us who have found themselves sitting on a comma and not knowing where to go next. We'll unpack the experience with them, where they've been stuck, what it feels like, what they experienced, and what they learned. My goal is to inspire you by seeing yourself in others. I believe that when we feel more connected and seen, magic can happen. All right, everybody, we are back with another episode of Off the Comma, the podcast. And this is, it's fall here in the world. So the temperatures are changing, noticing that people are starting to catch whatever germs are flowing around. And this will be the episode today where it seems like both of us are either recovering from or coming into some type of a cold or bug or what have you. So bear with us as we rattle our way through the episode today. But I don't think that's going to change anything. I'm very excited to be talking to Beverley. She is a newly found acquaintance and friend of mine, and I'm really looking forward to hearing her story today. Beverley, I'm going to turn it over to you. Let's get started. Tell us, how would you like to be known and what would you like people to know about you?
Yeah, so I suppose I'd probably start with a good mum, determined, motivational, hopefully inspirational, heart-centered, making a difference, and very family orientated.
All right, cool. All such warm words too. I noticed the emphasis on kind of connection with others is really what I'm seeing and hearing. What else would you like people to know about yourself before we jump into your story today? I love the sea, and I relocated from being inland in the UK to Dorset, which is like my happy place, which is on the south coast of England. So I'm from Hertfordshire, which is a county sort of just north of London, and now we live on the south coast by the sea. I'm a completely single parent, so I'm kind of a mum and a dad to my 18-year-old son. And on the work side of things, I'm a mindfulness Pilates teacher and author, and I also love teaching stress management. Probably all the things that I needed to learn myself, I teach to others. Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I imagine that keeps you busy, stress management in today's world. And I particularly enjoy and resonate with what you said. Like the things I learned for myself, I teach. It's so powerful.
Yeah, I think that's the whole reason I've come into my work. I needed it myself. I still need it, and I still have to do it daily. And it's evolved. Things evolve as you go along, don't they? You don't necessarily plan books you're going to write or areas that you're going to help in. But I think for me, it's been very much a personally led experience of different pains, physical, mental, that have led me into that work, whether it's been back pain initially for the Pilates, but also, sort of road traffic accidents and mental pain have helped, inspired me to work in that area. And then people coming to me because of their mental health struggles and stress in the workplace and personally. But it's always reflected back at me that I need those tools as much as they do. So I love kind of that thing. I need it, but I'm very good at teaching it to others as well, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's fascinating how much we're mirrors to each other, right? And whether we recognize it or not, and the power that happens when we do recognize and see it, it can be very informative to say the least, right? And yet it can also be very it can create a lot of things, right? When we start to see the mirror of ourselves in others, right?
Yeah, and then people really appreciate, like my clients, or people really appreciate that they don't want the fact that I've suffered a lot in my life, but they do appreciate that I have a very deep understanding, for example, of back pain and prolapsed discs and sciatica and all these sorts of things that I help people with their bodies and stuff. But they then understand, because you've got to obviously have qualifications and things. You've got to obviously have experience. But if you have personal experience as well, I think kind of with this line of teaching, it's kind of the icing on the cake. But it also, sort of it drives you as well, particularly as we met in UK recently, and it was a fantastic experience, working experience together and sharing of our lives and businesses. And also, I think if I cry about something I really care about personally or in my work, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm depressed, although I have been depressed in the past. But if I cry about something, it means a lot, and there's like a calling that I've got to do something with that. So that in particular is sort of helping with mental health and well-being and making a difference and things like that. But if I'm seeing someone else, I remember we had to all talk for 10 minutes about our work and why we did it. And then 9 minutes in, I was just having a good old, a proper heart-centered, real cry about the pain I felt about someone I know quite closely who was suffering with their mental health. And things, there's different paths that people can go down. And luckily they're going down a good path now, but they were at a very bad place. And yeah, that sort of thing drives me.
Yeah. Well, and our bodies are they're so wise, right? And like you said, crying is an indication of deep feeling. And so our bodies give us the signs and show us about ourselves, right? So Beverley, I'm looking forward to hearing your story. And like all my guests, you and I haven't talked about what you're going to be sharing today. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to share. Before we get into the 5 questions that I ask of each guest, I always start with intention. So as you look ahead to the conversation we're going to have this next 45 minutes to an hour or so, what intention would you have for yourself?
The word that's coming up is intrigue, because I find your podcast very interesting. And the interview with Katrina was my absolute favourite so far. I think your podcast it's very interesting, and you're going to be in for a very interesting conversation. So for me, I suppose I'm intrigued to see where this conversation will go. I think you have to be brave to be a guest on your podcast, especially if you're deciding you're going to talk about something in the present tense, because that often I would say you're less likely to have healed or come through the other end of the comma and the block and the problems. So, yeah, I'll be interested to see where the conversation goes, and hopefully it'll be a good one.
Nice. Well, and my intention is to support you in your intention, and to hold a space for your story to unfold and for you to share what you want to share with us. And as I like to say to many of my guests, let the story tell itself, and that hopefully, your story will land on someone else's ears and that they will learn something about themselves through your experience. So let's dive in with the first question. So Beverley, tell us, where have you found yourself sitting on a comma in your life?
Well, this is quite a difficult one because there have been so many commas. So it's like, which on earth comma should we talk about, really? Because obviously I know your questions from your podcast. So I haven't even decided which comma to talk about. There have been so many multiple commas. There have been road traffic accidents. There have been moments of nearly dying, giving birth to my son 18 years ago. There have been, emotional, psychological, domestic abuse. There have been so many commas. There's been chronic fatigue. There's, been back pain. But the comma I felt, and with things like the road traffic accident, there's mental pain and physical pain, and many angles to that sort of thing. I felt like perhaps I would maybe share about a comma and problems that happened not so much this year, but in recent years, of mental health strain and having panic attacks, and the reason behind those panic attacks, because there is always a reason behind different mental health struggles. And it is part of what drives me on in the stress to calm work, of both seeing those I know suffer and other people around the world suffering, but also that I did experience some of this suffering, which I think I'd be quite, maybe not happy isn't the right word to talk about, but I will delve into it perhaps a little bit with you.
Mm. It sounds like your life has been shaped by a lot of dramatic events, and what you've shared with us so far is certainly some of these significant events having to do with trauma and pain, and it sounds like, correct me if I'm misstating this, a degree of suffering that has also informed or taught you things along the way. Is that a fair reflection?
Yeah. I had to learn. I believe that, some of the best authors in the world, for example, like I know Louise Hay. I mean, she went through a tremendous amount of suffering in her earlier life. She has passed away now, but she's still a wonderful, wonderful role model and author. And I think I hope and believe that people will be going through less and less in their life, but there still seems to be a commonality with fellow authors that many, not all, and not particularly recommending it either, have been through either too much or rather a lot. And, in the past, in my Hertfordshire days, I had a very successful in-person Pilates studios and hundreds of clients. And it was a successful, financially wealthy, six-figure business. But after all the different rock bottoms and making a decision to start afresh in a whole new county, that was like everything had to start all over again from scratch, like 9 years ago. And within that 9 years, it's been, I would say, tumultuous, a bit like the waves of the sea, really. There are good times, challenging times, and sad times of life. The inner determination and spark has kept me going. But when you're starting all over again and you're having to heal from the past, I went through I still am deeply spiritual. I went through a phase of teaching other work as well and writing an amazing book. I talked to angels and things like that. But it was all a little bit scattered, and I hadn't got that financial foundation back that you desperate as a human. You have to have a strong financial foundation. You don't have to be rich to be happy, and there are studies that show it's only a certain income that you need to be comfortable and have enough foundation to be happy. But if you are below that actually can become very, very stressful, and that's what happened to me. Everything else was okay, and a lot of healing had taken place. But what would happen on occasion would be panic attacks and kind of this. It's like the body takes over in this panic at times, not all the time, but it actually got to a point one year, and I wasn't suicidal, but I did get to a point where I didn't care if I woke up in the morning. That sounds really terrible, but that's how low I did get. And I wasn't planning anything. And there's no way in a million years, I'd leave my son, because he is I do everything for him and I've done everything for him and will continue. I'm like a warrior for him. But my business wasn't doing it well enough at the time, and I hadn't, when you start all over again somewhere completely new, and then there's a pandemic, which I know threw everybody out, the pandemic, and then it's like, half your in-person clients don't want to work on Zoom, and you're kind of building a whole new thing, and does it work? Is it going to work? And teaching, say, Pilates exercise on Zoom, actually, yes, it does work. Oh my goodness. And then things started to change. I could work on Zoom. Then you've got to learn about how to market this, business networking then work. It's a relief.
Beverley, if I may, I would love to jump in. You're starting to transition us into, okay, and then what happened? And I want to save some of that for some of these later questions that we're going to ask. First, I just want to acknowledge you. It sounds like that was an extremely difficult time for you. And the invitation I have for you, because you said, I know that sounds terrible. And regardless of how it may or may not have felt for you, I just want to acknowledge that it was your reality and it's what you were experiencing. And And that at least here in telling your story, you don't have to place any judgments on it, good, bad, right, or wrong, because what you were experiencing kind of is the thing. You were mentioning at the beginning when you were introducing yourself about teaching the things that you learned for yourself. And so even within this experience, I mean, you brought it here today, and it sounds like there's potentially some really important messages in that. So I'd love to kind of stay with for a moment the experience itself, the comma that you were sitting on, this whole kind of dramatic period of restarting, reorienting, rebuilding, and transition into my second question, which is, as you look back at that comma that you've really started to crack open for us, what did sitting on that comma create for you at that time?
Well, I wanted to express how I felt and ask for help. So I did share what was going on, sort of close family. It wasn't, on a few occasions, it wasn't always easy for my son to see me, so low at times. He's very sweet and give me a hug or get me a cup of tea or hold my hand. But he deep down, he does know I'm a solution focused person. But I went through lots of different, what am I going to do here? Of course, I did apply for part-time work. I did also consider training as a psychologist, and because I do have a degree in sports science, from University of Brighton. So it could have been an option to do a master's degree, and then carry on, as well as what I'm doing, to do that part-time. And then, because really what I wanted, the result I wanted was, financial stability. And so that was what certain options. And I also considered, training in cognitive behavioral therapy, that sort of thing. But all of these things take time, and they're not going to give you immediate results. So, but I did go through sort of different options and ideas, and before I knew it, I was writing some more books, and my publisher said yes, and then other things were happening, and then within that time frame, suddenly things shifted, and whether it's because I put myself in, maybe probably because I was in that solution focused, and also marketing and doing business networking online, because if my clients are often coming from online, then from meeting them online, and then they could come and try, one of my, Pilates taster sessions and classes, and see if they liked it, and then see if they want to join from there. And it sort of started to sort of grow. And books started to write themselves, and people would start to say, "Oh, would you help me with my stress?" A lawyer, for example, asked that question, and that's led to a whole other thing, and other things that just sort of happened. But I took action to. But I wasn't, I knew this particular lawyer for 2 years, and I had no idea that she had bad stress. I had no idea she wanted my help. And I had no idea then I'd teach her law firm, and I had no idea I would then ask my publisher for one book. And then I had no idea my publisher would say, well, we want you to write at least 3 books. And I had no idea that I'd have a co-author, Janie Lee Grace, which I do now, and she's fantastic. So I had no idea. So sitting on the comma was pretty bad, but at the same time, I kept going, and I kept turning up to things, and I let, if somebody asked me for help, I'd say, yes. But then ideas were just like, it was like ideas were flowing in of how I could help people, but I had to use those tools for myself, and it helped me recover from those panic attacks. I wasn't feeling great after using the stress to calm tools. I was feeling okay, and I was feeling optimistic again. I wasn't feeling great or on top of the world, but I was okay again, and I could calm myself and get myself back into a solution-focused space to, okay, off we go again, get a cup of tea, go good night, sleep, and tomorrow's another day.
Yeah, no, I hear that. And I really want to dive in a little deeper on just one particular part, because, what you described earlier was pretty profound and pretty significant. It sounds like you were really in deep physically in that transition, in deep mentally and emotionally in that transition. And yet you use the word I had no idea, the phrase I had no idea several times. So, and you said things just started happening. Tell us a little bit more. You started to touch on it, but tell us a little bit more. What changed in you? What was happening in you? Because obviously all of this didn't happen overnight and it didn't happen by magic, but you're describing that it started happening in these small, surprising stages. What was it like for you? Like, what was changing and shifting in you?
I just think I saw things that were working, and I also, excuse me, the word that's coming to me is replicate. To kind of replicate what I used to do at my old studios, and that formula. But it was just that I was replicating it and doing it online. So in myself, I was obviously noticing I could feel better if something was working and the income was starting to increase and then starting to increase. And that then made me sort of physiologically and obviously mentally feel better, because obviously the mind and the body are so linked. You know, a panic attack or something, or feeling very low, is it tends to be very linked to, this is just my take on it, it's very linked to there's a root cause to it. Like, I've had panic attacks before, but that was after a road traffic accident. That was because of post-traumatic stress disorder. This is different. This is like a situational reason for it. There's completely different reasons. But to me, there's usually a root cause to it. And then in myself, to move through it, it's like I learned these, not just mindfulness Pilates, which is exercise and mind body exercise, but I suppose at the time I created these stress to calm tools which worked for me, and I was like, oh, this is good. This is good. This is good, and this works. And it's like, oh, I was like my own guinea pig. So I was like experimenting on myself. Okay, Bev, you don't feel like doing this. You're still halfway through the panic attack, and you're coming to the end of it, and you know you've got to calm your breathing down, but you still feel horrendous. Are you going to either stay as you are, or are you going to choose happiness and optimism and a solution? And are you going to get on with your 7 1-minute tools, which you've just been teaching the lawyer? Yes, I am actually. I am going to. And I will also reassure my son, because he can hear me from the room next door, crying my eyes out. And, kind of like can hardly breathe. You can't hide it if you live in a 2-bedroom flat. You can't hide it if somebody's suffering in their mental health. So it's like, yes, I am going to use my tools, and I'm going to write how I feel now, and I'm going to write how I feel after, and I'm going to do them, and I'm going to set an alarm for another minute until I've done the next one, until I've done the 7 minutes, and then I will assess how I am afterwards, and then I'll move on from there.
So you're describing a process, from what I'm hearing, and correct me, anywhere that I'm wrong in this reflection, this process of being in the thick of it, and then sort of out of the blue, which we all know things don't really just happen out of the blue, right? But that people started asking for your help with certain things that involved you sharing different types of tools, techniques to help with physical and mental well-being. And so in this process of being asked to help others, you saw yourself in that and started to actually use these tools that you were developing for others on yourself. I mean, you just described the process of, the physical, tactical process of sitting down and let me write my current state. Let me do the practice. Let me write what I learned. Let me do it again if I need to. But what you're describing is that as things started to unfold, the tools you were creating for others, you used for yourself.
Yeah, I had to use them for myself. Otherwise, I wouldn't be much of an inspiration to anyone. And also, I think it's also interesting to see, because depending on how you are when you do them, depends on what the outcome is typically going to be. I mean, people typically, I've done the statistics on everyone I've worked with of how they are before and after in relation to stress. And typically I get a 40 to 75. Well, I'm teaching it. You know what it's like as a coach. I'm teaching it. They're doing it. So they are doing it to get the results, of course, but I'm just facilitating the teaching of the tools. And that then obviously self-empowers them. But typically they're getting 40 to 75% reduction in stress. And, if you can go from a panic attack and feeling extremely low and not wanting to wake up in the morning to feeling okay and optimistic, that's a fantastic result. But, you can be on a good day and then you can feel fantastic from it. But the last thing you feel like doing at that moment is smiling or sitting with good posture. But that is what you've got to make yourself do. You've got to sit up. You've got to sit yourself up, and you've got to get that good posture, and you've got to smile when you don't feel like it. And there's amazing research on all these tools. And then I think it's also, I got into that study mode again of me and my co-author Janie, we're researching and we're studying and we're finding, it's interesting. So I suppose I found maybe also a passion again. It's like, this is some people like the research and science behind things. So it's got all of that behind it, but it did me good as well because I had to study, but I didn't end up booking myself in for the psychology qualification degree and master's.
You went a different path.
Instead, I just delved into kind of the more sports science past background of then delving into research behind the tools. It's like, it was really, I suppose it's been interesting. And, when you have a team around you, it's much better than being on your own as well. And you get much better results and you can help more people. And, but you've always got to help yourself first though, haven't you? You've got to help yourself and your own little family. And then sort of, and as you say, with the mirror, you've got to put the mirror up.
Well, you described a couple of things here that I want to give attention to. Practicing the thing, which is sort of, to use a catchphrase, practicing what you preach. People have asked you to teach these things. You started practicing them. It required a lot of self-observation. And you described this in a couple of different ways. You described earlier watching yourself when you were in the process of a panic attack, knowing when it was about to come to an end. Those things don't happen without self-observation. The actual physical act of writing down what you notice about yourself before you put a tool into practice, and then writing down what you notice about yourself after you've practiced the tool, and then noticing your interest level in these different things that you're pursuing. I mean, just having something that interests you and that motivates you and keeps you going, even if it's different than the thing you had originally anticipated, because you said, well, I didn't pursue the psychology degree because this other thing was interesting to me. I think those are all just important noticings. And then the last thing I'll reflect back is that you flat out said, and not having to go it alone, having a team, having a community, having kind of like a feedback mechanism or mirrors around you. So these are all really powerful, as you look at what the experience was like.
Yeah, I don't mind if you want me to share one more panic attack moment. I haven't shared it anywhere, actually. I'm happy to share one more if you want me to.
This is your platform today. Go for it.
Okay, well, I think maybe I'll share this because some people may relate to the overwhelm of this. I have obviously, so every Sunday morning, I have this really lovely date with my mum, but my mum doesn't live nearby. So we have a date on the telephone, and I always walk and cycle to these beautiful gardens here. There's this fantastic gardens. And we basically go on this little journey to the garden together. And I often take her on FaceTime around the gardens and, and we pick positive affirmation cards and we talk about what it means. And it's usually a really lovely, special weekly catch up, chat about the week, time together. But it didn't go to plan that day. We were having our nice chat on the way. But I don't particularly like cycling on the road. That was how I was hit with the road traffic accident. I was on my bicycle and hit by a car. But it isn't just the fact that I'm not scared to go on a road now, but some roads are just really, really busy. And I'd rather just walk on the path talking to my mum. But I've got my heavy bag and I've got my little basket and I put my bag in my basket. And I'm most of the time I'm either cycling along the path, or if there are pedestrians, I will get off my bike and I will walk along with my bike, which I think is quite polite. But, you're not supposed to really cycle on the path. But anyway. But at that moment in time, I was overwhelmed I was at the overwhelmed stage, and there had been on-off panic attacks because I hadn't turned the corner financially at that point, which I have now. But at that point, I hadn't. And there's some people can be funny in that particular beautiful area, and they they can get angry at you if you're walking on the path holding onto a bicycle, and they raise their voice at me quite a lot, maybe shouting. Anyway, they were like having a go at me because I was walking politely with my bike on the path, and my reaction was I was like a dog barking back at them, and I was like, it's so unlike me, though, Paul. It's so unlike me. But my stress levels, by somebody, it felt like an attack. And I suppose but what happened was I had this absolute. I just carried on, and the panic attack was quite it was a very big panic attack, and I just couldn't walk anymore, and I just slumped on the path, and I think my bike, next to the wall, and I slumped on the path, and I was having this almighty hyperventilating, panic attack and crying, and my mum's still on the phone with me. My poor mum's hearing the whole thing. My poor mum. And she was trying to just calm your breathing down. And then there's these two pedestrians. One of them stopped, and then another one stopped who was with a bike, and he just stood with me. And he said, "Are you all right?" Obviously, I wasn't all right. He said, "Do you want some water?" So I drank his whole bottle of the cyclist water. I drank his whole bottle of water. Then he was giving me something sugary. And he was just they were just really, really kind. He just stood there with me while I was in a right state. And he just stood there until I'd calmed myself down. My mum's still there on the phone. Bless my mum. And she said, she encouraged me to go to the beautiful gardens and to go and get that brownie and go and get that coffee and go and sit in that beautiful garden. And we carried on talking. I managed to, after a while, get up and then move forwards again. And that is a panic attack I have never shared before.
So I want to ask a question. What's significant about sharing that story? What's important about that story for you?
I suppose for me, it's embarrassing to break down in public. It's easier to be having a panic attack at home. You want to have it together all the time. And I know we don't all have it together all the time, but to have strangers on the street, coming up to you to help you at a real low point. But I'm very grateful for them, actually. There are some really kind people out there, but I feel I want to share it because I just want to say I feel other people's pain and suffering and mental health struggles. And, I shared with you when we met, here in the UK recently, somebody close to me, they were worse than me mentally, how I was saying, and they were put on because they weren't actually planning that. They, called the doctors, and because they weren't planning their suicide or self-harming, they're put on a waiting list. Yes, they spoke to the emergency mental health team, but then they're on a waiting list. But what happens? What's going to happen between that waiting list for that person who is, So that really, they were lucky that they were able to afford private therapy, and they are okay now and thriving. However, there's a lot of people who are suffering and waiting on waiting lists and aren't able to do that. So, it kind of means a lot to me to say I understand a little bit. Yeah. And I want, our work to help with that more.
It seems, just a reflection, and then I'll invite you to respond in the third question here. It seems that story was also important because of just the realness of it, right? Like you said, I'm used to having these at home, or it's kind of embarrassing to have a panic attack out in public. And yet that is the reality. That is when they happen. You can't necessarily control that. And yet you were still able to rebound, if not recover, and sounds like you did actually recover from it, that there was the kindness of strangers. So again, not doing it alone. I just see these things kind of coming up for you, and in sharing the experience about your friend, it strikes me how you can relate, because you yourself have dealt with this kind of significant challenge that you've had to carry at this point in your life, this point that you've been sharing with us, of the financial insecurity or instability, and knowing what it's like to kind of not know where the solutions are going to come from. So it's just powerful. Again, what you said, being able to relate to others because you've been there yourself.
Yeah, I think more than the panic attacks, the fact I'm not an argumentative or snappy type of personality. So to be honest, more than the panic attack, it's the fact that I was like a Rottweiler replying to their Rottweiler tone at me. I think that is because that's not really me, but then that shows you how up to here I got. And that obviously was a reaction. And if, when people's boundaries are crossed, anger comes out. And that's where I think, it's so nice if you can use, tools or stress to calm tools or whatever it is for each person to build that inner strength and resilience, so that you don't get like, because peace brings peace, whereas anger or raised voices brings often and more anger and raised voices, unless the person's got a nice, strong resilience going on. And then that doesn't happen because it won't react.
Would it be fair to say, from just the little bit that you've shared with us so far today, that your panic attacks have arisen when you've been pushed out of not even out of your comfort zone? I don't think that's a fair statement. When you've been pushed beyond your limits of control or the space that you want to be.
On that occasion, yes. On the other occasion, it's like a volcano erupting of the realization of the state that, in relation to this, it's the financials. And not knowing how to turn it around at that point. So that was just just a kind of an eruption of a panic attack.
Yeah, but yet also it occurs to me that also is another example of you're stretched beyond your comfort zone there.
Oh yeah,
into the area of feeling out of control. Like the two examples is what made me say that.
That is what a panic attack. Yeah. You aren't you're not your normal self. No.
It's powerful. Again, the power of noticing, right? And observation. Bev, what have you learned about yourself through this experience, this comma that you've sat on?
Oh gosh. Don't leave a 6-figure business behind. Be more patient and sell it before moving on. And also, even though the financial advisors say you have 6 months savings, that's not enough if you haven't got a clear plan as well. No, but in reality, I've just learned so much. I think I'm very grateful that I've learned tools that I can help myself with, and I know they will always work for me very quickly. I just have to do 7 minutes and I will be okay or good or great. Therefore, I can now also help many, many more people with those. That's really exciting, to have books coming out to help people with that. But also learning you have to do of the researching and the science and that learning. That's interesting learning to me, but also learning with the statistics. I actually hated statistics at university. However, I actually get joy from seeing what the statistical results are. So perhaps I don't hate it after all.
Well, I'm curious about that. So, because that sounds like it's a new element for you, and yet you're smiling and it sounds like you're very happy about this.
Yeah, exactly. I am now. I hate it. I found it very difficult.
Yeah, but what was it? What changed for you, or what makes it so much more interesting now?
Well, if you're studying statistics at university, it's just so difficult. It's not just as simple as doing a quick percentage or a quick percentage reduction. That's quite it. easy, but it was just also complicated. And it's just, it's my brain just fried. I don't know if you use that expression, but it was just sports science is actually pretty difficult degree. One point I thought changing it, but actually I can see why I did it now. It is actually very interesting as well. So how it is now is the statistics are easy to find out from the before and after stress score, for example. But that is also a powerful result, and it's motivating for me to see that, but also for the person or the company I'm working with. It's motivating to them as well, because there is a clear improvement or reduction in stress or whatever, well-being, mental health. So so that is. So going from something I hated it's something actually I now find really positive.
It seems like relevance is the variable. Before, when it was just general study and there wasn't anything specific to apply it to, but now you've got something that you're extremely passionate about, and now the statistics makes perfect sense because it's relevant. It's part of the story now, whereas before it was just this other thing.
I suppose you've got a point there. Whereas now I'm like, I suppose real examples. If I hear about Amy Cuddy, psychologist, having done a study on smiling and putting pencil between people, this isn't a pencil, but putting pencil between people's teeth, and the difference in the mental health and well-being and happiness between not doing stressful tasks in a study and having a neutral expression and having a forced smile with a pencil between teeth. I find that really interesting, and I that you can make a difference, whether it's a genuine smile or not genuine smile can make a difference to mental health and happiness. So all these different sorts of learnings, I find interesting, but I'm hoping it's going to help and inspire other people to actually pick up these tools and use them.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because now you've got me thinking, this concept here. And I'm writing this down for myself, but you're talking about statistics never really resonated for me. But then when I was able to bring statistics into something that I'm already passionate about, it adds to the story. It makes sense. I was thinking about my experience. I'm learning Spanish right now, and there's the textbooks, book exercises, and the verb conjugations and so forth. And yes, that's interesting to me, but it's when I started listening to podcasts or having conversations with my tutor that when there's context and I know kind of what it is I'm working towards, then it becomes much more interesting and maybe not easier, but more purposeful. And I think the other thing that I'm picking up from this before we go on to our fourth question is, you can, how do I want to say this in a way that's useful? That when we think about context is something that can come to us that enhances the experience we're already having and makes it mean something more. And there can be context that we currently have that we then go out and seek a different story to expand the context. I'm going to leave that alone because that's kind of
I've got one thing to say on that.
Go.
So I'm finding it interesting. So I see results in people, and I know there's going to be some more confidence or some more happiness or more success. And there is kind of research that we have this 4-in-1 tool. It's the happy exercise, but what I then observe and other effects that are coming in, like it isn't in the research, but I'm noticing from what they're saying that their energy is better, their energy levels have gone up. So then lately, I was interviewed on another podcast because I've had chronic fatigue. She said, do you teach mindfulness Pilates classes, especially for chronic fatigue management? I said, no, but I'm open to it. And I do already teach clients with that. And then, of course, off I go, because I've noticed some of the 1-minute tools boost energy. No, I haven't got research on that, but because I'm noticing that and people are saying it, I'm like, well, I'll add that in, and I'm now gonna offer, very gentle 30 minutes for for chronic fatigue management, and then add a sitting classes in for some people who are too scared of that. And it kind of leads one thing to another thing and to another thing, and you're like, oh, this is really interesting. It's like, oh, I could help another person in a different way with that. And because that helps that.
And it's a great example of how you are the research in some cases, right? Question 4 for you, Bev. What changes for you, or what has changed for you as a result of sitting on this comma?
Oh gosh, where do I start? What's changed? What's changed? I think I have a big respect for mental health. I think something that I really cried about when I met you. It's not a typical thing when you first meet someone for the first time that you're there bawling your eyes out. But the thing that really gets to me is if somebody has a cut or a wound that's bleeding, they will be seen by accident and emergency at the. You can either put a plaster on, clean it up with a plaster on, or if it's bad or very bad, you can go to the hospital. You can call an ambulance. You can go to the hospital, and accident and emergency will see that person. However, if there is, mental health problems going on in the head. I mean, my brother Richard, who's died now, actually, he had bipolar. He didn't die because of the bipolar, but there's a lot of different mental health suffering going on, and I don't feel that those who are suffering in mental health are getting the same fast help that is always needed. Sometimes they are, but sometimes not. And so that's just what I felt like saying on that. Would you say the question again, Paul?
Yeah, it was what changes for you, or what has changed for you as a result of sitting on this comma?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I'm so proud of how far I've come, and I'm so proud that I know I can sort myself out. I don't need anyone else to sort me out. I just have to sort myself out. And I know I can I don't need to get a Pilates mat out for an hour or half an hour. I can just sit on my bed all cozy with a cup of tea and a pen and paper and get on with my 7 1-minute stress to calm tools. But what's changed, so many things have changed. This has been a whole week of, I just had another radio interview earlier, another radio interview last week. It's, not really expecting all of that. Obviously, you want to do some bit of PR for your book and stuff, but to have 3 books already lined up, we've written 3 already, and to have those coming out, I'm very proud of that. I think all the hard work and I've put so many hours into the business networking and to be, I just know every week more and more clients want to work with me, and I sort of know that these books are going to really help people as well. We're going to do audio books with them as well, myself and my course Janie. And there is great hope. I'm nowhere near where I was financially, but life is so much richer now and happier. And I'm living a dream lifestyle because I'm choosing to. I'm choosing to, go to a coffee shop in an afternoon. I didn't say. But I'm choosing to go to a nice coffee shop in the afternoon. I'm choosing to go plunging in the sea and go to a plunging in the sea club here, seeing friends regularly and things like that. And I have a passion for journaling. And so it feels like a beautiful balance between passionate work, cozy family life, and swimming in the sea and coffee shops in the middle.
Yeah. Well, and look at how things have evolved for you. And I just want to acknowledge that the very difficulties you experienced have now turned into the things that are creating all of this new experience for you, right? Like the difficult times turned the problem, so to speak, turned into the challenge, which turned into then the solution. I see this all the time. I see it in myself as well, that often the difficult things we're experiencing not only shape us, but then end up kind of becoming the door through which we walk to the next thing. And then we bring those things with us because we then somehow are helping or inspiring or modeling or mirroring for other people. And I see this very much in your story, that those difficult things you went through actually became the rungs on the ladder that you climbed out of it.
Yeah, yeah, and I felt it's time to sort of share little bit more about that because, yeah, 100%, really, 100%.
Yeah.
But it's funny how sort of it took one person coming to ask me for the help. Obviously, I needed the help too, but I used the help for myself, and then the person coming to me was Anna Illingworth. Actually, I'm allowed to say her name because she's actually writing the foreword to our book Stress to Calm in 7 Minutes for Lawyers. So she's written the foreword because it transformed her stress management. She's okay now. She just gets on with the tools, or she books me in for workshops and classes with her team or whatever. But if she hadn't asked me, then I don't think all of this ricochet effect would have happened.
Yeah. The power of giving to others, even when we are struggling ourselves, right? Bev, last question. What does getting off the comma look like for you?
Oh, just like a sigh of relief. It's like as soon as you said that, I just like took a breath, and it's like a sigh of relief, and it's a bit like a celebration as well. And it's also it's a whole new journey of, it's exciting. It's exciting to. There's one of my tools I just love. It's the happy exercise, and it's just to be going out there and sharing these sorts of things with others as well. You can't just use it yourself, can you? Is a lovely thing.
That's beautiful. So as we look back at and thank you for sharing. I mean, there's just so much here that you've shared, and so many things that I could understand as being very vulnerable. So thank you for trusting us with the things that you've shared. And what would you acknowledge yourself for? I asked you your intention at the beginning of the conversation. What would you acknowledge yourself for at the end of the conversation?
Well, the intention was intrigue, and I knew if I was going to come on your podcast, I knew I am brave anyway, but I wanted to be brave publicly with some of the things I've shared today. Yeah, I just think well done. I think well done for being a determined person, being a determined businesswoman and author, and not giving up, and making a lot of effort, which has turned mine and my little family's life around. But also I can share some of those tools and hopefully magic and happiness with others too, really, in body and mind.
And you have. So Bev, tell us, and I'll have the details in the show notes, so you can just hit the highlights for us, but where could people find you if they want to get in touch with you?
Yes, you can either head over to my website, which obviously is in the show notes, or Beverley Densham on social media everywhere for you as well. Love to see you there. And of course, on my podcast as well, welcome to take a listen to the Mindfulness Pilates podcast.
Awesome. And then also one other thing that I do with all of my guests, because I feel like it's part of the story, and it also supports what I want to create with the podcast, which is lifting others up. So we do this section called Acknowledgements, where I invite you to basically share with us anybody that you would like to boost or give publicity to or just lift up. And that can be individual creators, it can be organizations, causes. Who would you like to acknowledge and give a voice to today?
So Janie Lee Grace, who is my co-author, but she's not just co-author together, but she's also author of other books as well. My dad actually bought me and my sister a present for Christmas of a workshop with Janie so many years ago. It's so kind of him. That's how we met. And she then introduced me to juicing as well. And we went to this juice documentary together with Jason Bale. It's his documentary, which is called Super Juice Me. That also really helped sort of learning about juicing and making juices and smoothies. And that was really sort of transformative, sort of health-wise. To give them a shout out, first of all. And then my sister is also an author. Her name is Julie New, and she's author of 2 fantastic books as well, The Grief Garden Path and Who Are the Flowers in Your Garden. And you mentioned about podcasts as well, didn't you?
Yeah, well, you had shared a couple of podcasts and books. So if you just want to hit one or two of those.
Yeah, one of my favorites actually is the late Wayne Dyer, and I feel like there's a bit of a similarity with you and Wayne Dyer, as in he has a lot of people. Well, he's passed away now. Thank you, Wayne, for your amazing work and so many books he's written. But there's this podcast, and they're quite short episodes, but everyone's ringing in with their problems. So but he shares so much wisdom of past authors as well. So that would be probably for me my number one go-to extra podcast.
Nice. Well, Bev, thank you so much for being with us and for being open and honest and brave and sharing your story with us today. And I look forward to off the mic having more conversations and interactions with you. Obviously, we're part of this mastermind group that was facilitated by Janie, and we'll be having more conversations and chats in the WhatsApp group.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paul. It was a great way to meet at the mastermind, and thank you so much for having me on your very interesting podcast.
Thank you very much. Have a great week. What an honor it is to witness these stories from these amazing human beings, and today's guest was no exception. I invite you to think about what you learned from this conversation. What stood out for you? What challenged you? What inspired you? And I encourage you to write it down in some form of journaling and reflection. I can't tell you how magical it can be to set aside your expectations and just let your thoughts flow out of your head and onto paper. You don't have to have an agenda. You don't have to do anything with it, but you can be amazed at what comes out of your thoughts and onto paper and what that can do for you. I know freestyle journaling has been a powerful practice in my life for a very long time. You just never know what you might discover about yourself. Thank you for listening to this episode of Off the Comma. Follow me on social media at Off the Comma, and also look for upcoming workshops and events at offthecomma.com, or better yet, go to offthecomma.com and sign up for my mailing list and let me bring the news directly to you. I am passionate about keeping this podcast ad-free so that we create a safe container for people to be able to tell their stories uninterrupted by commercials and promotions. I currently cover all the production costs, and I'm happy to continue doing so. And I'm also open to and appreciative of any donations that anyone would like to contribute. This is nothing more than to be able to support the podcast and cover some of the monthly editing and producing and equipment costs that are associated with this podcast. So look for the donations link in the podcast descriptions wherever you find this podcast. Be sure to like this episode, follow the podcast, and more importantly, spread the good word. If you were moved by today's conversation, pass it along to someone you care about. As always, keep noticing.